Dear friends, when I was invited to come here and speak to all of you, I told the organizer that you're making a mistake. I'm neither a historian nor a political scientist, not even a social scientist. I explained to my comrade that my PhD is in molecular biology and biochemistry. That is my field. But then it given me an advantage. Since I don't emerge from social sciences, I have an advantage of questioning everything which I read. I have to read it twice, thrice, sometimes 10 times, and I keep negotiating with the ideas there. That is my advantage also. Today is 6th of December. It's the anniversary of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar passing away. I think given that Babasaheb Ambedkar is a visionary of the Constitution and a driving force for all the great values of legacy of freedom struggle we talk about. Maybe we should pay some tribute to him by standing up for maybe a few seconds and think of Babasaheb Ambedkar. Thank you. On 25th of December 1927, Babasaheb Ambedkar burnt Manusmriti. Not only because of his stand on caste, but also because of his stand on patriarchy. And as you know, the present ruling dispensation in the center is very keen to bring back Manusmriti as the Constitution of India. The Constitution. In fact, their leadership, RSS leadership, has several times expressed this opinion. In 1950 itself, on 26 January, when Constitution became the Constitution of India, saying there's a great mistake. There's no mention of Manusmriti in this Constitution. And they argued the Constitution should be replaced by Manusmriti. If we are not careful, next year, they will, after winning the Lok Sabha election, the first task they are going to do is to establish a constituent assembly of their own, which will make Manusmriti the constitution. On 20th March 1927, few months before Manusmriti was burnt, Babasaheb Ambedkar from Mahad went to that small town Mahad, went to the local pond and dared to walk up to the water and take water from. That was a rebellion by Babasaheb Ambedkar against what you people have been fighting for in Vaikom Satyagraha also. It was a rebellion by him. By just taking water out of the pond, he rebelled against the whole history of Brahmanism. It is in this background that we can think about what is the challenge ahead of us. I was just told that you have the Vaikam Satyagraha is like Navathanam. It's Renaissance, like Navjagran in Hindi. The whole society is Navathanam. It is Navathanam that should be the goal of what we are trying to fight against. Without Navathanam, India cannot live up to the expectations of the Constitution of India, nor to the legacy of the freedom struggle. We all talk of freedom struggle as a nationalist movement. Volumes have been written on nationalist movement. Today also we heard about nationalist movement. Because I don't belong to social science, I told you I have an advantage. So I can apply a different approach. I argue, and I have written a lot on this, published material, that the the freedom movement of India had two dimensions, and both dimensions functioned together in parallel with each other. One was anti-caste and anti-patriarchy movement. We started before the national movement. Started in 1848 with Savitribai Phule and Mahatma Jyotiba Phule opening the first school for the girls of Dalit girls. First school in the history of India. The 5,000-year-old history of India. First school of Dalit girls. And that was a step towards building up an anti-caste and anti-patriarchy movement. The other is anti-imperialist movement. Both anti-caste and anti-imperialist movement have been running throughout the last 100 years almost in parallel with each other, interacting sometimes and not interacting at other times. Learning from each other and not learning from each other. They're a very important part of our history. As I have mentioned about 1848, the first school in the history of India for girls. By 1853, there were 5 or 6 schools in Pune for Dalit boys and Dalit girls, and sometimes mixed. And each time this happened, Savitribai Phule and her close comrade, Fatima Sheikh, both had to face lot of opposition from the upper caste. The upper caste people used to throw stones at them, throw dirt on them, throw cow dung on them, abuse them while they were walking up to the school, but they did not care about it, and they went on teaching the children. How does Fatima Sheikh comes in the picture? It's very important because we're talking about secularism as a very important value of our constitution, legacy of the freedom struggle. Fatima Sheikh comes in the picture because Savitribai Jyotiba Phule started interacting with the Dalit children by inviting them to their home. This was not liked by Jyotiba Phule's father. So he threw both Savitribai and Jyotiba Phule on the street. There was no place to go. So next door was the home of Fatima Sheikh's father. So both Fatima Sheikh and her father invited Savitribai and Jyotiba Phule to live with them and continue to do whatever they are doing. This is how Fatima Sheikh comes into the picture, and Fatima Sheikh and Savitribai became lifelong comrades in the anti-caste, anti-patriarchy struggle. Why do I keep mentioning anti-caste and patriarchy together? There is a reason. In 1916, when Babasaheb Ambedkar was in Columbia University doing his PhD, there was an anthropology seminar where he gave a very fantastic lecture, very innovative lecture, which was later on published as a long essay called Caste in India. There he established it is a caste which imprisoned the women within the caste. So the patriarchy emerges out of caste limiting the marriage process, the traditional marriage process, where you have to marry within the caste. And therefore, later on he arrived at the conclusion that patriarchy cannot be destroyed without destroying caste. And caste cannot be destroyed without destroying or dismantling patriarchy. It's a very, very profound thought from Babasaheb Ambedkar. Therefore, the two battles are together, anti-caste and anti-patriarchy. We were being told by, I think Professor Gopal Guru was mentioning the need to learn from the political documents, truly. But I want to place before you, maybe some of you have heard about it. In 1855, one girl student of Savitribai, known as Mukta Salve, now popularly known as Muktabai, 11-year-old girl, student of Savitribai and Fatima Sheikh, she wrote a long article in Marathi, which was immediately published by a local magazine called Gyanoday, published from Ahmednagar city. And that 1855 document has not been translated into many languages. I hope Malayalam translation will also come out. I have read that article from Muktabai many a times. It's an amazing article. At the age of 11, she had such a broad vision and such a minute observation of everything which was happening against Dalit girls or Dalit boys, against the whole society of Dalits. and what was being done by the Brahmins and upper caste, and especially the Peshwa rule. Pune had the Peshwa rule. How Peshwas were acting as upper caste people, trying to take away all the basic rights of the people who were not Brahmins, who were Dalits. Mang and Mahar. Dr. Ambedkar was one of the Mahar people. But Mang also, Mang and Mahar were two big Dalit castes. So that article itself is an article of liberation by a girl of age 11 years age. If you want to do a Malayalam translation, I'll be very happy to provide the English version which I have prepared. This is very important. In 1873, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule wrote his historic document called Gulamgiri, in English slavery. In Gulamgiri, he used sarcasm. Sarcasm as a tool for understanding history of Brahmanism from the times of Vedas downwards. A tool of analysis, sarcasm. It's worth reading. I'm sure there's a Malayali translation available of slavery. It's available in many languages. These are very important documents if we have to take the battle forward. In 1878, now I'm touching upon the anti-imperialist aspect of our freedom movement, legacy of the freedom movement. 1878, Dadabhai Naoroji, a Parsi trader, he was a Parsi trader in cotton, taking cotton from India, selling it to other countries. He was not just a trader, he was a great thinker and self-made economist. He collected economic data from all provinces and all parts of India, the larger India, not the present circumscribed India, all the way from Pakhtunistan and Peshawar, and even from parts of Myanmar today, from many parts of the subcontinent of India, and economic data, and based upon economic data, he arrived at certain conclusions. Dadabhai Naoroji wrote his document, which turned out to be a book later on, published even in England, and book was, Drain of Wealth. Wealth is being drained away. Wealth in India is being drained away. Drain of wealth in India, in un-British India. And lot of economic data put together and calculated, computed, and conclusions arrived at. How the wealth being generated in India is being taken away by the British Empire. And India is being impoverished. The whole story, impoverishment. And that is from where the first stand against anti-imperialism in India was taken. Against imperialism was taken, that was by Dadabhai Naoroji, a Parsi. I repeat this. In 1885, he founded the Indian National Congress Party and became thereafter its leader also. In 1882, British government set up a Hunter Commission in education. It's a very well-known commission. Its archives are available in Kolkata. They're still available there. Mahatma Jyotiba Phule presented a memorandum, initially written in Marathi, then translated into English by himself. In that, there are several very important issues raised by Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, which are still relevant even today, and after NEP 2020 of the present government, they become even far more relevant than they were earlier. They're far more relevant today. One of the first issues which he touches upon in the memorandum is about how the money which is being collected by the British government is used for education. He says all the income which the British Empire gains in India is from the production done by the farmers of India. And he uses a very interesting term. He says the money generated by the farmers from the sweat of the brow of the cow. When the farmer is working hard, then a lot of sweat comes out here. So from the sweat of the brow of the farmer, the money comes to in the treasury of the British Empire. And how is it used? And he answers, it is used to provide education, higher education for the upper classes, upper caste. Nothing goes for the education of the masses of India. He argues, this is one very important argument. He goes on to say that the entire education is alienating. Even when it is given in Marathi, it is alienating because it should have been given in the Marathi language, but in the script which is called Modi. It's a local Modi script of the Western Maharashtra. Why Modi script? And here Jyotiba Phule is very sharp intelligence. He says why Modi script is because it is in the Modi script all the revenue records from 15th century onwards through the Peshwai rule have been, all the land records, revenue records are maintained in Modi script. If children learn the Modi script, then they will be able to read the revenue records, and this will empower them and their families to fight against the loot by the British Empire to take money out of the farming sector by knowing the land records. It's very wise. That you should know Modi script so that you can read the revenue records. He goes on to say that we have now teachers who don't want to talk to or teach the children from the exploited, oppressed caste and classes. They ignore them. But we want teachers who will not feel embarrassed to hold a saw in their hand or to work as a carpenter, who will in fact teach carpentry to the children. We want such teachers who will not be ashamed of working with the parents and the family members of the children. And this is what is a great vision which he gave. What kind of teachers we need. He said today's teachers don't want to work with oppressed classes and oppressed castes. Today of that time. There are some glimpses I'm giving. And he talked about introducing a curriculum on agriculture, a curriculum on environment, curriculum on farming, and all this he talked about. And this is all old story, 1882. Hunter Commission carried on his work, and in one of the later meetings of the Hunter Commission, Dadabhai Naoroji, coming with his economic data and his whole vision of how India is being looted and impoverished. And he challenged the British Empire again in the Hunter Commission that you're not providing adequate money for education. And this is not going to be tolerated by us. And he uses some Gujarati poem he was a Gujarati also, and Gujarati poem to talk about how resources are not being given, adequate resources. He says, whatever you spend per child in Britain, if you give even 1/12 of it, it will be adequate for us. You don't even give 1/12 of the money which you give on education of British children, you don't give even 1/12 of that for Indian children. And there he enlarges the scope of his battle against British Empire. Due to the limitation of time, I will not touch upon everything. But in 1911, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, in the Imperial Assembly, at that time Imperial Assembly, placed a draft bill, the first draft bill in India for demanding free and compulsory education. It was heavily opposed by the representatives of the upper classes, upper caste. There was a Maharaja of Darbhanga. Darbhanga is a district in Bihar today. At that time it was a big kingdom on the border of Nepal. The Maharaja of Darbhanga went around various landlords and other Maharajas and Rajas all over the country collecting signatures. He collected 12,000 signatures. And the memorandum said that if all children are given education, as free and compulsory education, who will work on our land as labor? That means they are acknowledging that children do the labor in the farms. At least they were honest enough to say that children are employed as labor. Today's ruling classes will not even acknowledge this, that even today, more than half of India's children are still working as laborers. That continues to be our story. In 1894, very important development took place in Maharashtra's education system. You may have heard of the district today called Kolhapur. At that time it was a small kingdom, Kolhapur. And the king of the Kolhapur kingdom was Shahuji Maharaj. He was a product of the Jyotiba Phule's Satyashodhak Samaj movement. In 1878, after writing Gulamgiri, he started Satyashodhak Samaj movement. It is still a alive movement, not over. And Shahuji Maharaj was a great follower of both Savitribai and Jyotiba Phule. So he decided, when he was given the power to rule Kolhapur state, he decided to focus on education. And The two or three only items which I can highlight right now. He was the first person in the country, in the history of India's education, who decided to open hostels attached to schools. So the children who are not living in towns or small kasbas or big cities, they can come from villages and live in the hostels and study. But he had a one condition. Hostel will not be only for one caste or another caste. Hostel will be open for all castes, Brahmins or Dalits, Mahar or Mang or Brahmins, it doesn't make any difference. All religions, Muslim children will be welcomed, Christian children will be welcomed, Hindu children will be welcomed in the same hostel. It's a revolution which has already taken place in India in 1890s and early 1990s. 1890s and from early 2000, 1900 years, yes. And that's one very important thing he took. The other thing is about resources for finance. We keep hearing since independence, there's not enough resources to educate everyone. And no government, whether previous or the present, is willing to provide adequate resources for equitable quality of education, which is a demand of the Constitution of India, equitable quality. No government is willing to provide adequate resources. Shahuji Maharaj provided adequate resources out of his small state, Kolhapur state, for all expenses required. Appointed teachers in every school, built housing for the village level teachers so that they won't feel that they don't have a place to stay. So a house was provided for every village level teacher. The amount of money which he spent in 1900s, sometime maybe around 1910, the amount of money which he spent on Kolhapur state education was more than the entire money which British government spent on the entire Bombay presidency. That was a presidency, was a Madras presidency here in South, Bombay presidency. Bombay presidency at that time included the present day Sindh province of Pakistan. That was part of Bombay presidency. It included several districts of present day Telangana and several districts of Karnataka, and then the entire Bombay city and the whole of Maharashtra. On such a large chunk of India's land, British government spent less money than the Shahuji Maharaj, the ruler of Kolhapur state, was able to provide and spend on the education of that small little state. And when I read all this and looked at all this data, I concluded, and I continue to conclude this, lack of resources is not the issue at all. Issue is not lack of resources. Issue is your political priority and your social commitment. That is the issue, not lack of resources. The government which fails to provide adequate resources does not have priority for providing equitable education for all. I think I should go a little further. 1919, as you all know, was a Jallianwala Bagh year. Most horrible attack on Indian people which ever took place. People were shaken up. As you know, that Rabindranath Tagore gave up his knighthood. A lot of people did that. Mahatma Gandhi declared non-cooperation movement, Asahayog Andolan. I'm sure Kerala people were involved in that in 1920. Gandhiji gave another very important call which is not so well known as part of non-cooperation. That was, he gave a call to all children and youth to quit British government schools and British government colleges, British government universities. Come out of the British education system and set up India's own unique national system, whether at school level, college level, or university level. Several lakh of people quit British education in one go. Amazing response to Gandhiji's call. One of the person who quit at that time, a student, MA student in economics in Aligarh Muslim University, he quit, came out of the campus, rented a couple of rooms and started a MA program in economics along with his friends. That program grew. More people joined. More resources became available over a period of time for them. And economics MA was continuing outside the campus of Aligarh Muslim University. Who was this young person who responded to Gandhiji? His name is Zakir Hussain, who responded to Gandhiji. And Zakir Hussain, you know, became president of India later on. He went to Germany to learn more economics and got his PhD from Germany, returned to India, and joined Gandhiji, in promoting the idea of Nai Talim, where Gandhiji gave a lecture in Wardha, 1937, in October 37, where he introduced a new idea, new vision of education, Nai Talim. People often, not just ordinary people, every government in India successfully has misunderstood or deliberately misunderstood or misconceived the meaning of Nai Talim. Nai Talim is not a program of vocational education. As Gandhiji's own words in 1937 lecture in Wardha said, I am not going to talk about higher education, I am not going to talk about secondary education, I am not going to talk about primary education, I am not going to talk about vocational education. What are you going to talk about? People were wondering. And Gandhiji quietly said, I am going to talk about education. It's all part of freedom struggle. And Nai Talim is an amazing idea which many institutions in Europe and America have learned, but we have refused to learn. Idea is that children should be involved in productive work. Young people or children should be involved in productive work, because each productive work is source of some scientific knowledge or knowledge of social sciences. When giving the lecture, I will not expand upon it. It's a very, very pet topic for me. I persuaded NCERT in 2005 to open its eyes to the Nai Talim concept of Gandhiji. With great difficulty they agreed, but they agreed finally. And I was given the task of chairing a committee which will prepare a position paper on Nai Talim, which was presented, but never, as expected, never implemented. Gandhiji, when he was giving the address in 1937, he was spinning his usual takli and making cotton fiber. He did it all the time. While doing it, he was talking. He said, look, when I'm doing this and making cotton thread out of it, then I am aware that I'll have to measure how many yards of cotton thread I have done, or how many kilos of cotton thread I have prepared. So I'll be weighing things, I'll be measuring things, so that is part of physics, that is part of mathematics, I'll be learning everything. Then he said something fantastic. He said, when doing all this, I'll be thinking of Lancashire and Manchester, the cotton mills there, who have looted India, who taken away our cotton and made fiber and then made cloth and sold it again to us, looting India. So I'll think about the history of loot in India also, British loot. And so this is a very important concept of education, which Indian government since independence until today has refused to accept. Of course, don't think about the present government even talking about it. I want to go back to 1857. It's a very important part of, because as I said, the values of Constitution are pious for us. What are those values? Sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic. Sovereign, very important. Socialist, secular, democratic republic. When Dr. Ambedkar was presenting the Constitution to the Constituent Assembly on 25th of November 1949, he gave a fantastic lecture. I will recommend those of you not heard that lecture, not read it, it's available digitally. Please find time. You cannot understand what should be the future of India, what kind of India we all want to build, unless we listen to Baba Saheb Ambedkar carefully. His lecture on 25th of November 1949. I just want to take advantage and read some part, very small parts. Because I mentioned democracy, democratic republic. Baba Saheb Ambedkar says there, he talks about that there was a time in India, and he was a very knowledgeable person, and he understood the history more than the historians. He said when India was studded with republics, even though there were some monarchies, but the republics were based upon elections. He goes on to say, a study of the Buddhist Bhikshu Sanghas discloses that not only there was parliaments, there were Sanghas which were themselves acting like parliaments. The Sanghas knew and observed all the rules of parliamentary procedure known in modern times. The rules regarding seating arrangements, regarding rules regarding motions, resolutions, quantum, whips, and so on and so forth. So this is what we have inherited from our own past. Question is whether Buddhist philosophy of democracy still prevails or it has been destroyed and turned upside down. About anti-caste and anti-patriarchy movement, I just want to mention quickly. You people coming from the state of Vaikom Satyagraha don't need to know all this. But anti-caste, anti-patriarchy movement is not limited to 1 or 2 or 3 states of India. It spread in the second half of 19th century and first half of 20th century. From 1850s to 1950s. It spread for 100 years in various states of India. I just recall that. I don't need to mention Kerala, but Kerala had the contribution of Mahatma Ayankali, then Narayan Giri. Assam had a 16th century activist, a social activist who was fighting against caste system in Assam called Shankar Dev. He's not followed by Assamese people, but they worship him. By worshipping people, you get rid of the real thought of the person, real philosophy of the person. So they worship Shankar Dev, and everybody in Assam knows the voice raised by Shankar Dev in 16th century against caste and patriarchy. In Tamil Nadu, we all know the role of Periyar, but before Periyar, there was Ayuthithas. Ayuthithas, when he realized that caste system is very stern and cannot be so easily dismantled, so he went to Sri Lanka and identified a Bodh Bhikshu. So Bodh and Buddhists were always against caste and patriarchy from the ancient times. When Vedas were being written, almost at the same time, Buddhist literature was coming out in Pali, talking against caste and against patriarchy. So Ayuthithas went to Sri Lanka and took a Diksha from one of the Buddhists there and returned to Tamil Nadu and continued his battle. Later, of course, Periyar in the early part of 20th century started a self-respect movement, anti-caste movement, and a rational movement for rationality. In Andhra Pradesh, similar steps were taken under the leadership of Kundukari Virsalingam and Gurujada Apparao. Maharashtra, long before Babasaheb Dr. Ambedkar and long before the Phule couple became active in this field, it was Sant Tukaram in 17th century through Marathi songs, singing and walking around the whole of Maharashtra state. Sant Tukaram was writing beautiful poetry, beautiful songs, questioning caste and patriarchy. And then, of course, I've talked about the role of both Jyotiba Phule and Savitribai Phule. And in Uttar Pradesh, very few people will realize this. Uttar Pradesh, there was a voice against caste and patriarchy in 15th century by Sant Kabir. Sant Kabir was a revolutionary of his times. And what he has written is relevant even today. And it's a very good story that a lot of young people in Madhya Pradesh, where I come from, a lot of young people have formed several Kabir Panthi groups to spread the message against caste and patriarchy, against dogma. And that's what it is. So Sant Kabir is still alive. And of course, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's classical historical document, which can never be forgotten, can never be undermined by the present ruling dispensation either. That is Discovery of India. More you read, more you want to read. He wrote this in the prison. In 1945-46, he was sitting in the prison and writing Discovery of India. We have all the access to our libraries, still we don't write anything like that. So these are the challenges coming from the story. I skip many things in between. In 1924, Bhagat Singh, by now still not in prison. In 1924, he wrote a short essay. He was very fond of writing many things. In fact, when he was doing high school, he wrote a beautiful essay on the issue of language. What kind of language should be there? So that is earlier. But in 1924, he wrote an article, The Problem of Untouchables, very relevant to Vaikom Satyagraha. And in that, he raised fundamental issues about what is caste, how caste is used to oppress and loot and exploit the Dalits. And he gave finally a clarion call. He understood because the land owned by the Dalits has been taken away from them by higher caste people. Therefore, he challenged the Dalit people, if you want to wake up and want to have equality around yourself, want to have access to resources. Yes, okay. So he gave a call to them, clarion call, that take over the land which has been taken away from your ancestors. Take it back. That is 1924. It was the same period of 20s when Chandrasekhar Azad was emerging as a major opponent of the British Empire, along with his colleagues like Ram Prasad Bismil and many others. And one of his close colleagues was Ashfaq Ullah Khan, who was a socialist. He was a fighter for freedom, fighter against imperialism, at the same time dedicated to promoting the cause of socialism. So these are some glimpses into how secularism was almost our, I will say that secularism is part of India's cultural history. It's nothing new. It's not a new concept. There is an economic advisor of Prime Minister named Dr. Bibek Oberoi. He wrote an article on 15th of August, published in many newspapers, where he claimed the all ideas in the Constitution of India are colonial ideas. That is why it is very important what we are talking about today. None of the ideas in the Constitution are from colonial period. They all are, in fact, questioning the colonial period. So secularism is a product of India's legacy of freedom struggle. I've talked about how much secularism was already there. And I'll touch upon 1857, very important. Secularism started from there. And Ashfaq Ullah Khan is an icon of secularism. If there was Ram Prasad Bismil and Chandrasekhar Azad and Bhagat Singh, there was also Ashfaq Ullah Khan. If there was, in the Azad Hind Fauj, led by Subhash Chandra Bose, if there was a commander, one of the commanders was Lakshmi Sehgal, Captain Lakshmi Sehgal, also Captain Shah Nawaz Khan. And Subhash Chandra Bose, who is used by the present ruling dispensation in Delhi to demonize Nehru and demonize Congress party, demonize everyone whom they don't like. Subhash Chandra Bose was, point number one, a dedicated socialist. Point number two, he was a dedicated secular person. When there was some tension of Hindus and Muslim army people of his Azad Hind Fauj, he did something wonderful. He asked them to make food in the evening, which is coming from the Muslim style and the Hindu style, the harar and halal, both kinds of meat will be made, mixed together, and everybody will eat it together. That was the end of the secularism, the end of the discrimination based on religion in that army. Azad Hind Fauj, entire Azad Hind Fauj was a secular army. Secularism is part of India's DNA. It doesn't come from anywhere outside India. It is part of it. It was born in 1857. I want to emphasize this. In fact, I'm holding before me a book by a former professor of political science in Delhi University. He is today very well known, Professor Shamsul Islam. His books have been translated into Malayalam, into Telugu, into Tamil, into Bangla, into Punjabi, into many languages of our country, many languages. He must have written about 24 books, published books are available. One of his books is called Muslims Against Partition of India. I'm not carrying it with me, but I think it's a book which is worth getting, if you, I can help you to get it at a very low cost. I've gone through the Hindi version of it. It is the beauty of Professor Shamsul Islam's writing is he doesn't say anything out of his own head. He reads, and he reads with great care. Everything he says is citation, like a scientist, like a social scientist, citation giving reference of the book, its publication year, page number, paragraph number of lines, year, date, everything. Everything is cited as citation should be there. So nobody can question. I've been asking me, how come the BJP has not attacked you so far? He said, because I'm only quoting RSS and BJP, only quoting them. Nothing is coming out of my head. So, here is this book about 1857, and very important part, and then I will conclude. In 1857, in the rebellion against British Empire, the first India's major independence struggle for independence. You will be amazed to know, unless you have read Savarkar, you will be amazed to know The Savarkar, who became the founder of Hindu Mahasabha later on and its leader, is part of a lot of debate. Savarkar wrote a book in 1907. He wrote in Marathi, Hindi himself, and then wrote later on also in English. The book is titled India's First War of Independence. It's based upon a lot of research, lot of data collection. And I am reading out one part of it, where he says, Hindus and Muslims fought in the battle shoulder to shoulder, battle against British Empire, shoulder to shoulder for the freedom of the country, so that India can become a free nation. While doing this, they shed their blood. The blood flowed on the battleground, battle of Muslims and Hindus together. And then he writes, because both of them, this is not surprising, because both of them were children of Bharat Mata. In 1907, it is Savarkar who is writing. They were children of Bharat Mata. And he named many of these people who were in the commanding position of the battle of the forces of Indian forces. Of course, some well-known names like Mangal Pandey, Rani Lakshmi Bai, Nana Sahab, Maulvi Ahmad Shah, Azimullah Khan, Tatya Tope, Bahadur Shah Zafar, Begum Zeenat, and many others. He names them. These were the leading commanders of Indian battle against British Empire. Azimullah Khan is referred by Savarkar as a strategist fighting the battle. The reason I am mentioning Savarkar here is because the Savarkar who is now being critiqued by all of us who read Savarkar, the later Savarkar. Savarkar, of course, asked for apology, tenders an apology, but in the process of being released from the Andaman Nicobar jail, he made a deal. He made a deal with the British Empire. I won't spend time on it. This very well recorded thing. The deal was that he will be released on the condition they will follow the British policy of divide and rule. If he promotes that policy, then he will be released. So he was released. And that Savarkar, after Andaman Nicobar, became a different Savarkar from the Savarkar he wrote India's first war of independence in 1907. The two Savarkar totally different from each other. Totally different. There's nothing common between them after that. It is that Savarkar, later Savarkar, who went to the extent of saying that there are two nationalities in India, one Hindu and one Muslim. The idea of two nationalities was given for the first time in India by Savarkar. And Jinnah loved it. Muhammad Ali Jinnah loved this idea. He also started talking about two nationalities, therefore partition of India. If anybody asks you where the partition idea comes from, it comes from Savarkar and Jinnah. The two became very good friends with each other. They have a common ideology. I won't take more time now. But I will withhold, before I close, a beautiful poem in Urdu written at the time of 1857, and when the Indian forces returned from the battleground, from some part of western UP, when they returned to Delhi, they went to Red Fort, and there was Bahadur Shah Zafar at that time, the last king, Mughal king there, and they pleaded with Bahadur Shah Zafar to accept becoming the king. 80%, it is recorded by a British reporter of Times London. This story is recorded by him. The 80% of the army people present in the Red Fort asking Bahadur Shah Zafar to become the king, they were Hindus. Only 20% or less were Muslims. When 80% of the army people are Hindus and they ask Bahadur Shah Zafar to become the next king of India, Badshah of Bharat, then you have to think twice about the relationship between Hindus and Muslims. That time, that was a secular army again. Azimullah Khan wrote a beautiful poem. Before I read that poem and conclude, so I've talked of sovereignty. I've just mentioned very quickly that little march of Dandi for taking a pinch of salt against the British rules and regulations, led by Gandhiji, was one of the greatest call one could give in India against for the sovereignty of India against British Empire. that you cannot tax even a pinch of salt. If you do, we'll rebel. That is the demand for sovereignty. Similarly, in Champaran, earlier, when Gandhiji went soon after coming back from South Africa, he went to Champaran. And there the Neel Satyagraha. And Neel Satyagraha was also a call for sovereignty of India. You cannot tax the Neel farmers and loot them, exploit them. He challenged the British law. Eventually, they won the battle. The Champaran battle, the Namak Satyagraha, Salt Satyagraha, these are all examples of battle of sovereignty. And then the greatest contribution for sovereignty was the idea of making your Swadeshi cloth. The Swadeshi cloth, the moment Swadeshi cloth started, British government started shaking up. Because the loot they were making of taking cotton from us and returning it in high cost cloth, that loot was going to come to an end. So all these are examples of battle for sovereignty. There was some debate whether we should accept the dominion status which British government was ready to offer in middle of 1930s after Gandhi-Irwin Pact. Congress party said no. We don't want any dominion status. We want Purna Swaraj, full Swaraj. And Nehru and Gandhi had some debate and difference of opinion. So Jawaharlal Nehru went to Lahore. On the banks of Ravi, there was a big convention of Indian National Congress and other people. And there, the idea of Purna Swaraj was declared. We want Purna Swaraj along with a memorandum prepared by Jawaharlal Nehru. And then Gandhiji also relaxed and accepted the idea of Purna Swaraj. And on 26 January in 1930, on the banks of Ravi, lakhs of people took the pledge for Purna Swaraj, not any compromised dominion status. This is sovereignty. Sovereignty has no place for taking lakhs and lakhs of crores of debt for setting up a chip factory in India, which is the agreement made by our Prime Minister when he met President Biden in America. He signed on a dotted line. A chip factory will be opened by a big corporation in America, and that will be all as debt to India. Lakhs of crores of rupees debt. That is loss of sovereignty, loss of India's freedom. I'm going to read that Annihilation of Caste, a famous poem, famous essay of 1936 essay of Baba Saheb Ambedkar, one of his finest treat of caste system in India. It was originally written to be delivered at the request of Jat Pat Todak Mandal of Punjab, at that time before partition. And he was supposed to go to Lahore to address Jat Pat Todak Mandal, but he did not for some reason. I don't know, it's a well-known reason, but I won't go into it. Towards the end of this long essay on annihilation of caste, to end he writes a short paragraph, maybe 4 lines. I'll read out those 4 lines, very powerful lines. Dr. Ambedkar writes, he's addressing, as if he's addressing people sitting in front of him, of Jat Pat Todak Mandal. There's an anti-caste movement in Punjab also, led by Lala Lajpat Rai. So, Dr. Ambedkar writes, yours is more difficult task than the other national causes, like Swaraj, like gaining Swaraj. In this, when you fight battles, you fight for Swaraj. You have to fight, the whole nation stands by you. But you fight against the caste system, the whole nation stands against you. But it is more important than the battle for Swaraj. There is no use having Swaraj if you cannot defend it. If you cannot defend it, what will you do with Swaraj? More important than the question of defending Swaraj is the question of defending the Hindus under the Swaraj. In my opinion, that is in Dr. Ambedkar's opinion, it is only when Hindu society becomes a casteless society that it can hope to have enough strength to defend itself. Without such internal strength, Swaraj for Hindus may turn out to be yet another step towards slavery. We have not paid any attention to this. I will conclude by this beautiful, inspiring poem written in 1857 by Azimullah Khan in the midst of the battle against British Empire. Where has it gone? Just a minute. Yes. It's written in Urdu, now written in Hindi script, Devanagari script. And there are some Urdu words, but it's a beautiful one, very emotional poem. And that is a evidence for secular cultural traditions of India, secular cultural history of India. Azimullah Khan writes, हम हैं इसके मालिक, I think you'll understand some Hindi. हम हैं इसके मालिक, हिंदुस्तान हमारा, पाक वतन है कौम का जन्नत से भी प्यारा. Jannat is heaven, is more lovely than heaven. यह हमारी मिल्कियत हिंदुस्तान हमारा, इसकी रूहानियत is a spirit, इसकी रूहानियत से रोशन है जग सारा. The whole world is enlightened by the spirit of India. ऊपर बर्फ, कितना कदीम, how ancient is it, कितना नईम, how happy it is, सब दुनिया से न्यारा. करती है जरखेज, जरखेज is a productive production. करती है जरखेज जिसे गंगा जमुना की धारा. It is Jamna Ganga which makes our land so productive. ऊपर बर्फीला पर्वत पहरेदार हमारा, नीचे साहिल पर बसता सागर का नक्कारा. The ice-bearing mountains of Himalayas are protecting us. And the ocean is giving that sound of waves to us. इसकी खानें, the mines of India, इसकी खानें उगल रही हैं सोना हीरा पन्ना. They're giving so much of gold, diamond and panna. इसकी शानो शौकत का दुनिया में है जयकारा. आया फिरंगी is British, आया फिरंगी दूर से ऐसा मंत्र मारा, लूटा दोनों हाथों से प्यारा वतन हमारा. आज शहीदों ने तुमको अहले वतन ललकारा. शहीद, the martyrs, the whole country is giving you a call. तोड़ो गुलामी की जंजीरों, बरसाओ अंगारा, हिंदू मुसलमान सिख हमारा भाई प्यारा प्यारा. लास्ट लाइन, यह है आज़ादी का झंडा, इसे सलाम हमारा. That is secular cultural tradition of India. It is not just part of constitution, which it is. It is a secular history of India, where religion is not the basis of any discrimination. And what is happening today against the cultural history of India since the times of Buddha, since the time of Vedas, from that time onwards, for 5,000 year history, is being dismantled by the present ruling dispensation. They are against the 5,000 years of history. And let me add, even Jain religion, the Tirthankars of Jain religion, one after another, the 24th Tirthankar is very well known for it, for giving a call against patriarchy and caste. Gautam Buddha gave a call against caste and patriarchy. At the time of Vedas were being written, the Charvak philosophy was against caste and patriarchy. At the same time when Vedas were being written. Yet the National Curriculum Framework 2023 does not even want to touch upon it. So that is not just an anti-constitution stand, it is an anti-India's cultural history stand. Anti-India's history, the cultural history of India, is being denied by the present ruling dispensation. Jai Hind.